So let's talk a little bit about authorized networks on an island. Now, an island can support multiple network interfaces of various kinds. Today, we're going to talk about physical interfaces such as the Ethernet copper ports, or an Island Pro, it could be the SFP plus ports, or VLANs, virtual LANs that can exist on top of one of your physical ports. All of the interfaces on an island router are routed ports. They're not switched ports. So every one is associated with a different IP network. By default, Island does not allow routing between the various networks on the island. For instance, devices on port one, for example, could not access devices on port two. Same is true with VLANs. Devices on one VLAN cannot access devices on another VLAN or another physical interface. By default, that's disallowed. There may be times, of course, when you need to have access between these interfaces. For instance, you may have security cameras on their own VLAN within the network, but your PCs within the house need to be able to access those cameras or the NVR to be able to see the videos and so on. So there is a legitimate need to be able to access devices across the network boundaries. Island allows you to configure that at a number of levels. You can configure it on a per device basis or per user or per group. You can also configure it on an entire interface so that all devices on a given interface can have access to the devices on another network. So let's see how that works. I'm going to start by showing devices. So from the home screen here, we're going to go to the Devices tab. Now let's just pick a device at random. Let's take my S9 tablet here. Now, if I scroll down on the right, you'll see here there's a part here called Authorized Networks. If I click here, it shows all of the various networks, the interfaces that are defined on this island. It shows the physical networks that are configured and in use, ports 1, 2, and 3. Now, it doesn't show the WAN interface here because devices on any network have access to the internet. So it doesn't show WAN ports in this list, but it does show all of my LAN ports. It also shows two VLANs that I have defined on this island. So you'll notice that this device, Lee's Tabs S9FE, has access to the guest network, the guest VLAN, and the home automation VLAN. If I wanted to, I could give this device also access to the test LAN. Now, what that means is that I can make an outgoing connection from this device here, from Lee's Tab S9, to a device that's on one of those other networks by its IP address. Now, one thing you might notice down here is you've got a little lock symbol on these icons near the VLANs. Now, what that means is that these are actually defined at a higher level, and I'm going to explain that here in just a minute. So it's actually inheriting this setting from a different location. But that's how you control authorized networks on a per device basis. I can do the same thing for users and groups. And just as we've discussed in other videos, if, for example, I go to this user, Lee, I can go down here and configure the authorized networks for that user. And just like we've discussed before, any device that is associated with that user will inherit these settings for the authorized networks, just like other settings for that user. And of course, the same thing for groups. I can go in here and I can say PCs, for example, may have access to EN1. And now this PC can access any device that's on the EN1 network. Now, as I mentioned earlier, not only can you do this on a per device basis or user or group, you can also give all devices on a specific interface access to devices on another interface. We do that by going to the Network tab and then choosing a network. So for example, I'm going to choose my home network and I'll scroll down here and we'll see, whoops, it is right here, Authorized Networks. You'll notice that I already have this set up so that my default home LAN, which is port 1, EN0, has access to both the guest network and the home automation network. Notice that little lock symbol is missing from these icons. These are defined at the top level, and this is what was inherited by those devices and users we looked at earlier. They actually had access to the guest and home automation network, by virtue of the fact that the LAN on which they resided had access to the guest and home automation network. In other words, those devices inherited it from interface one. Now, it's important to note that this is a one-way permission. This is a one-way authorization. When I set up the home network to authorize it to access devices on the guest network and the home automation network, that does not mean that devices on the guest and home automation networks can access devices on this network. If you wanted to make that happen, you'd have to go to that particular network. For instance, I will go to the guest VLAN, and if I should choose to do so, I can go to authorized networks and give the devices on that network access to my home LAN. I'm not going to do that, and the security reasons are pretty obvious here. I would like from my private network within my home to be able to access devices that are on the guest VLAN as well as the home automation VLAN. But I don't by default want that to happen in reverse. For instance, if guests come and connect to my guest Wi-Fi at my house, I don't want them to have access into my private LAN. So this is a one-way association. You have to configure it for each direction where it's needed.